Hey, I'm Teresa Lusk, host of the Teresa Lusk Show. Sometimes we forget that our government officials are actually still human beings. I had the honor of interviewing Texas Senator Angela Paxton. I want to show you a little bit about her life. Angela is more than a senator. She's a grandmother, a mom. She was a counselor and a teacher. Well, today you get to hear her story. Join me today as you hear this woman reveal her heart and so much more. I know that you will not be disappointed. Well, beautiful friends, I am being joined today by the amazing Texas Senator Angela Paxton. Senator, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much, Teresa. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Oh my goodness. Listen, today you're in for a treat. I met this woman at an event and I had a conversation with her. Senator, that conversation we had just moved me. You shared your heart about some things that were just so transparent when it came to, you know, how you got into politics and so much more. But today, I want to talk a little bit about who is Angela. Of course, we want to hear about Senator Angela Paxton, but I want you to get to know the woman. So, Senator, tell us a little bit about who is Angela.
Well, I will tell you, being a senator is probably the most unexpected little detour, or whatever you want to call it, along the path of my life in this journey. I tell people all the time, it not in my wildest dreams or darkest nightmares did I ever think I would run for office. I knew a little too much, right? And most people probably know that I'm married to the Texas Attorney General and my husband Ken, and I've been married for, well, it'll be 37 years this year in November. Our anniversary is November 1st, so it's always right around Election Day.
Oh, okay. Right?
Now, obviously, he wasn't a politician when I married him. Well, he kind of was. He was a student body president at Baylor when we met, and I always tell people, you know, when we met, he was just student body president. Now he's the Attorney General. I think I did a good job, right? So that's good work, right? Yes. But yeah, we're coming up on 37 years, and you know, he was always very interested in politics, and I was always very supportive of that. And so I was engaged with him a lot in helping him run for office when we decided to do that. That is a spiritual moment in our lives as a couple, and each juncture along the way has been. So, but the juncture for me was a big surprise, something I never was looking for, but it kind of fell into my lap. But you know, as much as I love being a senator, and I love my husband, my family, my favorite thing, and kind of the thing I'm obsessed with right now, is being Baba. So I have 3 little grandchildren now. We have 4 kids that are all grown. We have a son, Tucker, who's 30, a daughter, Abby, who's 28, just came out of the Air Force as a captain.
Wow.
And her husband is a major in the Air Force. They have a little girl named Aurora Joy Rose, and she is almost 9 months old.
Oh, precious.
Then we have a daughter, Maddie, and her husband, she and her husband met at Texas A&M. He was in the Corps, so he just actually came out of his military service in Killeen at Fort Hood, and has gone on staff with their church, and he's going to be the headmaster of their Christian school.
Wow.
So Maddie was a teacher, and they have 2 little boys, Paxton and Theodore. Oh. Paxton's 2.5, Theodore's just turned 1 in July. And then our youngest daughter, Katie, is also a teacher. She just got engaged, and she is 24, and just moved to New York, and she's going to be, I think she just landed a job as a permanent sub, And so she'll be teaching up there, and her fiance Ryan is up there as well.
Wow, well, your cup is running over.
Yes, it is.
Your cup is running over.
But the best cup is the Baba cup, for sure.
Well,
For
of
sure.
course.
I have to tell you this, Teresa. You know, picking my grandmother name I think, ended up being a bigger deal to me than like naming my kids.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, I get it. I have a grandbaby. I get that.
So it was like such a big deal, right? And so I was, I was talking to my friends about, what were their ideas, and a friend of mine gave me, printed off a list of grandparent names around the world.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, to help me, kind of open my mind and get out of the box a little bit, right? So I'm looking through this list and, reading these names, and it's like, Greece and, Eastern Europe and, all of Asia and, all of the, Chinese. And anyway, I'm going through all these names, and then I see Baba. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is the first sound babies make. If I am Baba, I will be their first word.
That's true.
And I'm like, that is it, and I was.
Oh.
And Ken is like, you are pounding it into them. And I'm like, no, I'm strategic. But so far Paxton always calls, talks to me, and I'm Baba. Teddy is just starting to go Baba, Baba, Baba.
Oh.
I think he's saying my name over and over again.
Of course, yes. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening there.
So anyway, but it is very interesting. I look back over my life, and we so often identify ourselves, I think especially women do, in terms of their family. I mean, that was the very first place I went, to my family, because that is so at the center of what I do, right, and what I care about. But, the very first thing is, like everyone that's listening and watching today, is that I'm a daughter of God.
That's right. That's right.
Right? A daughter of the King. And, that is the grounding center for me. I think I may have told you, Teresa, that I might not be here today. My life began as an unexpected pregnancy.
That's right.
And so my birth mother was a student in college. She was at TCU, wasn't married, and when she discovered she was pregnant, and so the family decided that the baby needed to have a mother and a father. And so I was adopted. And I was born on Valentine's Day.
Oh, wow.
In 1963. I always loved my birthday. It was a lot of fun. My mom and dad told me that the store's decorated for my birthday, and I believed that for a lot longer than I should have. I believed that longer than I believed in Santa Claus, right? And then, of course, I taught my own children that the store's decorated for my birthday, too.
Oh, that's so precious. That's sweet.
But yeah, I mean, I knew I was adopted. I don't remember my parents sitting me down and telling me. It was something I grew up with. I knew that about me, like I knew that, that lady has a baby in her tummy, right? But I had really great, loving Christian parents that I think were always very aware they might not have ever been parents and weren't able to have children. And so they were very purposeful parents. I have a little brother who's also adopted. And so, I just have grown up with this awareness that life is a gift.
Yeah.
Life is a gift. It's true for all of us.
Sure.
None of us might be here. Any number of things could have prevented that, but I've always known that. And none of us choose our parents.
That's true, yes.
None of us choose our parents, but I knew God had manually placed me with this wonderful couple.
Oh, I believe that all the way, which actually, does that influence how you lead as a senator today? Because there's some things that you stand for because you were adopted.
Well, that's exactly right, Teresa. And, I've had the opportunity to share my story about adoption many, many times throughout my life. And I'm also I'm a singer, songwriter. Actually, I was kind of professionally, I was a school teacher, taught high school math and physics, and then I became a school counselor and kind of finished out my time in the education field in that particular role. But the thing that I've always loved is music. And I grew up in the church. I grew up singing, and when I was in college, my hippie uncle got a new guitar and gave me his old guitar. So I'd taken piano lessons growing up, because all of our mothers make us take piano lessons, and so I'd done that. But I took the little guitar my uncle gave me to the little music store down in Mansfield, Texas, where I grew up, which was a little bitty town at the time. Now it's a much bigger place than it was. I think there's just one high school. I graduated with 280 something kids, and but anyway, took some guitar lessons, just enough to learn basic chords, and started leading worship in at my church and in different situations. And so actually ended up doing an album with mostly original songs on it. When I was pregnant with my first, Tucker, used to travel around and sing, and anyway, I was a worship leader for a long time as well.
Excuse me. So that was something that you wanted to do even as a young girl. You wanted to do the music, and that was your thing.
Yeah. Well, and it was a real connecting experience for me with the Lord. Mm-hmm. Music has always been like that for me. And I think, I kind of started, I remember kind of in middle school starting to write poetry, and most of my poems were really just, they were prayers, to the Lord, to Jesus. Aww. And so they were very personal to me. So I think music always had a very personal connection. And of course that is, I think most worship music, it's a prayer, right?
It is. And I heard you mention that you were also a teacher.
Yeah.
And a counselor. And I was thinking about this because I heard you say you taught physics. Yeah. And I'm sitting here going, wait, physics, counseling, like it's music. This is wonderful, but it's in so many directions, and that's very interesting to me. So you taught first, or you were a counselor first?
I taught first.
Okay.
Yeah. So actually, I majored in mathematical science, computer science at Baylor.
Wow.
And that's where Ken and I met.
Okay.
And I was actually sort of on track. My major was kind of built to be a systems engineer. I had interned with IBM while I was in college, and I was really going in that direction. And Ken and I met, started dating, and along the way, though, I loved school. I loved school. I enjoyed teaching. I knew my teachers had such an impact on me. Education was really important to my parents, and neither of them had gone to graduate from college. They both had graduated from high school, but they wanted that for me, and they knew the power of a good education.
That's right.
So I'm the first person in my family to graduate from college. Wow. Okay. And I think that was just something that was always of interest to me. And then, after Ken and I decided that we wanted to get married, and I started thinking more about how did I want to invest my life, I decided I wanted to invest it in kids. I wanted to invest it in the future, right? And again, because I knew how powerful the relationships of some of my teachers had been in helping me feel free to really explore and find out what I was good at and encourage me to try new things, right? So I loved math. My mom thought that was really weird.
I think most people who don't like math think it's really weird also, so we admire you.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, I loved it. I actually, when Ken and I got married, we moved to Houston. He was working in Houston. I went back to school and got my master's in education and got certified to teach.
Okay.
So I did my student teaching in Houston at a massive high school, in Houston. And then when I finished that, we moved to Virginia and lived there for 3 years, and Kim went to law school at the University of Virginia. Okay. Great law school, great experience to live in that beautiful part of the country. And I started teaching.
Wow.
And I also coach, because you make like $50 extra a year if you have your master's in education, right? And then you make maybe $100 extra a year if you coach.
There you go. So.
But I loved it, and I loved the opportunity to pour into kids, right?
Yeah.
The that people have poured into me.
Absolutely. Well, I would think that that even influences your passion for what you stand for today as a senator. I know we're talking about the woman, but every once in a while we have to throw in the senator part of you, which you can't separate because you lead based on your convictions and things of that nature.
Well, that's exactly right, and I'm very blessed. You know, as you might guess, we haven't had a lot of teachers in the legislature.
Mm-hmm.
We really haven't. Part of that is because the way we do this here in Texas. The legislature is in session for 140 days every other year, right? That's basically the spring semester. It lines up with most spring semesters of schools, whether it's K through 12 or college. Well, you really can't be a teacher and then take off every other spring semester, right? That doesn't work out. So, but most jobs are like that. You really can't take off every other semester. So what you have in the legislature, for the most part, are people who are either independently wealthy. They have a business that can run without them being there hands-on all the time. They have a spouse that has a good supporting income. They're retired. Or crazy people like my husband and I who don't fit any of those categories, really. But the Lord has always provided for us. But I'm the first educator elected to the Texas Senate in more than 2 decades.
Wow.
And I appreciate very much that the lieutenant governor, you know, was because he decides what committees we're on. And, you know, I've served as the vice chair of the education committee.
Oh, wonderful.
And I've also served as vice chair of the State Affairs Committee. And so I've obviously been able to use my experience as an educator and speak from the place of a teacher.
Yes.
As people are making policy about things that seem like a great idea, but, you know, I have many times said things, and there will be lots of teachers in the hearing room, right? And I will say, I know this seems like the greatest idea, but if you're a teacher, and I look around and the room is like, yes, thank you, right? The other place, though, is my life experience as an adopted child, and as a result of an unexpected pregnancy. And I have to tell you, when I was just in the early days of running for the Senate, Michelle was my campaign manager, also a believer. And Michelle and I were talking, and we were talking about me being adopted. And this was 2017, 2018, when I was campaigning for that very first term. And I remember we were talking about the fact that it was adopted. I've met my birth mother, and she's a part of my life, and I think we were having a conversation related to that. But I remember Michelle said to me, she said, Angela, what if you got to be the person that God used to end abortion in Texas, to protect innocent life?
Wow.
And I get chills saying it right now, but of course, that was like the most impossible thing in the world, right? I carried some great pro-life, pro-woman legislation in my very first session in 2019. But in only my second session, I co-authored the heartbeat law, which prohibited abortion once a heartbeat is detected for a baby. And I authored in the Senate the Human Life Protection Act, which ended abortion in Texas.
Okay, first of all, my viewers need to know I feel so extremely honored to be sitting here with a woman who took care of that. That is such a big deal.
Well, it's a big deal. I assure you, I did not take care of it by myself, right?
Sure.
I mean, it was one of those things that I realized, probably not in any full extent, right? But I realized the enormity of what I was doing. And clearly, all of the work that had come before it that brought that into place.
Right.
And I remember, this was a moment that I will remember for the rest of my life. Even if I forget my own name someday, I'll remember this. I remember when I was laying out the bill on the floor. So it was a fight to get it through committee, it was obviously, that is it's an emotional issue for people.
And the warfare.
And it is a spiritual issue.
Right.
It is life and death, right?
Yeah.
So it had been a battle all the way along. But when I got to the floor to pass the bill, to lay out the bill for the vote, I remember, just, it was kind of a lot of ugly interchanges, as you can guess, right?
I can imagine.
And every once in a while, some of the folks that were with me would, give me a break. They'd ask me, they'd give me a little bit of a breather and ask me a question or, bring up something about the bill that was, that we all supported, right? But I remember, it took a few hours of this interaction, right? It was not pleasant,
Sure.
I'll just say, right? And I remember, though, in the middle of that, as I was listening to another member go on and on and on, and in the back of my mind, and I think the Lord just reminded me of this, Angela, you have the votes.
That's so good.
You have the votes. We had the majority. You have the votes. And it was such a spiritual lesson for me, not just in that moment, but I was like, oh my gosh, it's true. I had the votes. And I realized, you know what, I want to do my best. I want to do my best representing the Lord, representing what is good, protecting life. I am bringing my best to this. Even if I do a bad job, even if I mess up, I have the votes.
So
It does not depend on me.
Amen.
And the Lord had paved the way. He had brought us together for that moment. So we passed it. And then when it came back, so the House also had to pass it, and then we had to bring it back up on the floor in the Senate.
Goodness.
Now when that happened, when I had it the second time, the Dobbs decision had passed. So now Roe v. Wade had been overturned. And so the wisdom of the way we did this, because the Human Life Protection Act basically said, it didn't outlaw abortion. It said, if Roe v. Wade is overturned, then we will proactively, it's sometimes called the trigger bill, that will trigger this abortion law to go into effect.
Wow.
And so the wisdom of the people that helped put all of that together, right? It was pretty amazing.
That is amazing.
But yes, I was honored to kind of be the person that got to plant the flag.
Absolutely.
But I didn't do it by myself. I couldn't have done it by myself. I am one vote. And the Lord had brought the people together over a long period of time to make it happen.
But somebody has to be a frontliner, Senator.
Well, I was honored to do it.
Yes.
And the other thing is that, and I've heard people say this, I've heard people say, I could not oppose where you stand on this more strongly than I do. I am completely against, I am pro-choice. I believe, because people have been lied to for 50 years, that this is a woman's right? They've been lied to and told a different story about what life is, right? So I get that, but so many times they will say, but I do know your story, and I kind of get where from you it makes sense.
Wow, that's actually powerful. I've never even thought of it. Certainly have never heard that. That is powerful, that somebody could think just because technically, you shouldn't have been born.
Right.
Right. But you are, and look at what you're doing. And it's all because you were now adopted even. That's a big deal, Senator. That's beautiful.
Well, and I think for some people, they're able to hear it and actually listen when they might not otherwise listen.
Right.
It's like, no, I so disagree with that, but I kind of get how you would feel that way.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That's so powerful. Oh my goodness, that's so powerful. So I want to kind of touch a little bit on your call to the Senate. We were talking before the program started, and we were just talking about how you even got started, because it's not like you sat around going, I want to be a senator, let me run into this political jungle. And
the last thing,
Tell us the story a little bit about how did that happen?
Well, it's funny because in the Paxton couple, Ken and Angela, right? I have always known that politics is important.
Okay.
I've always been, paid attention to the issues. I've paid attention to candidates because I know that it matters that we have people there, that I have people in office, in elected office, whatever level, whether it's national, whether it's state, whether it's city or school board, right? All of those things, it really matters that you have people that will reflect your values as they make decisions, right? So, and then obviously, Ken was really interested in it. One of our very first dates, I remember when we were still students at Baylor, walking around the Baylor campus, and we had this long conversation about what are your dreams, right? If money were no object, if there weren't if there weren't things that would keep you from being able to accomplish this, you could just do whatever, what would you do? And, Ken asked me, and I said, I would sing.
Oh, there you go.
I would sing for God. I would lead people, I would lead people in worship. And I got to do that for a long time. And he was so supportive, helping me pursue that and do that. And that's a lot of rehearsals.
Oh,
and
yes, lots of time.
He was having to change the diapers and all that kind of stuff. It's good for him.
That's good.
Anyway, dads don't babysit. That doesn't count.
That's right.
They're parenting, right? So,
That's right.
But I asked Ken, I said, what about you? And he said, I'd like to run for office.
That's awesome.
And now he never thought about state office because you don't make a living in state office. So for those of you who probably are not aware of this, as a state senator, which is a full-time job, the Senate is only in session, legislature is only in session 140 days every other year.
Okay.
So we're like full-time in Austin. But the job itself is all the time. I mean, when I'm not in session, I'm back here. I'm meeting with constituents. I'm speaking to groups. I think you've heard me say this when I've been at things speaking, but my motto is listen, learn, lead. And so that's what I try to do. I try to do that when I'm in Austin, but I do that when I'm at home, and it takes all kinds of forms, right? But it's a very full-time endeavor. But I make $600 a month.
Wow.
Whether I need it or not, right? So it is not something that, in our family, I was home with 4 little kids. I was a stay-at-home mom, and I took a break from teaching, when our kids were young. And Ken had his own law practice, but, you can't raise a family on $600 a month.
Right, absolutely.
Right? So it was a real step of faith. In fact, I remember Ken saying, you understand that we're going to have to figure something out about the money here if this all, and I said, Ken, this is only a problem if you win. And I said, it's only a problem if you win, and you only win if God makes that happen. It is a real uphill battle. There were 5 people in that race for the Texas House. It was a brand new seat up in McKinney. And so anyway, I said, if God has you win, then he's got a plan for the money.
That's right.
And he did. And so, I walked through that. I was very involved in helping Ken run, campaigning with him, and that sort of thing. And of course, as anyone that's been watching this long knows, I enjoy talking. I have a lot to say, right? And so people would say, you should run for something. And I'm like, oh, right, that is the last. I would like the talking part, but I don't want to, that's Ken's thing. That's not my thing, right?
Yeah.
But I'm so proud to support him and help, right? So that's kind of how it was. So people always assumed I was like the real political, I must be a real political person. So, because I was married to a very political person,
Sure.
right? And so people, when I went back to teaching after our youngest got into, I guess, 2nd grade, I went back to teach. And, people, when it came time for elections, people always came and said, okay, here's who's running for this and this, who do we vote for? And so I always had those kinds of conversations with people. But it wasn't my heartbeat, right? But it mattered to me.
Okay.
Our sitting state senator decided to run for Congress because the congressman decided to retire.
Okay.
So as we were looking at all of this, Ken and I both were supporting a current state rep at the time to run for the Texas Senate. This person had years of experience in the House. We knew them, we trusted them, and so everything's fine. Now, there was someone else who had announced they were also going to run. They didn't live here, they bought property in the district, okay? And they could also self-fund.
Okay.
All right, so they were able to raise money from themselves as opposed to have to raise money, for the campaign.
Yeah.
And they had a lot to spend. We obviously were supporting the person who lived here in Collin County, who had a vested interest in this county and knew it and loved it and it was home. So anyway, time moves on. School starts in August. It was the weekend we were taking our youngest daughter to college, actually. So I was just on the verge of being an empty nester. Again, Ken was already Attorney General. And I remember I was sitting in chapel, so I taught at a private Christian school in Frisco. And it was a Wednesday or Thursday, I guess. I remember sitting, because I was working the soundboard for our headmaster who was, or not headmaster, but the principal for middle school was teaching the Bible study that day in chapel. And I get a text from Ken. And it says, "Will you run for the Texas Senate?" And I'm like, okay, clearly something weird is happening in the world. Where did that come from, right? Anyway, I'm like, sure, when do I start, right? But it wasn't serious. I'm just like, what's that all about? So anyway, later in the afternoon, when I got a break, I called him. And he goes, "Well, will you?" And I said, "Ken, what are you talking about?" And he said, "Will you run for the Senate?" And I said, "Ken, clearly something has happened in the world. There's already someone running for the Senate." He goes, "He dropped out." I said, "No." So the guy we had been supporting had just dropped out.
Oh, wow.
And it turned out it was because the other person had just announced he was going to spend $2 million on the race. Well, no one could compete with that kind of money. So that was an exorbitant amount to spend on a Senate race. So anyway, I said, "Oh no, Ken," and I'm like, we got to find somebody. He said, "I've already talked to all these people."
Yeah.
And he said, no one will do it. It's the money.
This isn't Moses' moment. Moses looking for somebody else to speak.
Well, there's a story there. I'm so glad you mentioned that because I said, "Ken, what are we going to do? This guy's going to walk in and buy it." And he said, "Ange, will you run?" And I said, "That is the dumbest idea and most desperate idea I have ever heard." And he goes, "No, think about it." He said, "I think you may be the only person who could actually overcome the financial advantage he has." And he said, "Listen, think about it. You've got great name ID." And he said, "You'll be able to raise enough money. You don't have to have the most money, but you'll be able to raise money." And he said, "The grassroots know you. They trust you. They'll be with you." And I was like, "Oh, that's a good argument, but no, right?" And I said, "That's the dumbest thing." Michelle, I mentioned earlier, who ended up coming over she was working with Ken. She came over and helped me run. But she was in the car with him and she goes, "For such a time as this, Angela?" And I said, "Shut up, Michelle." Anyway, he goes, "Well, just pray about it." So that was a Thursday or Tuesday, I don't remember. I was praying about it. So I woke up on Friday morning with Moses in my mind, on my heart, saying, I can't do this. I'm not the right person for this, right? And I remembered how God said to Moses, "No, I'm bringing the people around you that you need. Your brother Aaron, your sister Miriam. I've got who you need. This is not all on you, right?" The next morning, when I woke up, it was Esther, right? And it's like, no, this, not me, right? And remember her cousin Mordecai said, how do you know that all of these things that have put you in this position that you're in right now
Right.
were not for this very purpose, for such a time as this?
Absolutely.
And then on Monday morning, when I woke up, we took our youngest daughter to college that weekend, dropped her off at A&M. I woke up Monday morning, and the Lord had Isaiah. And I woke up, and I just said, here I am, Lord, send me.
Amen.
I'll do it. And I walked into my principal's office that morning, and I said, I need to talk to you. He goes, well, it looks like something's on your mind. And I said, I think I'm supposed to take a break from being the counselor. I think I'm supposed to run for the Texas Senate.
Wow.
And he said, what happened? Everything was fine on Friday. Right? I told him the story. He goes, well, before you say anything else, I always thought you were supposed to do something like this. Go change the world. Which is what I had on the wall in my counseling office.
That's so precious.
Change the world, because that is what I taught kids.
That's so beautiful. That's so touching. And I love this story, Senator, because I think some people are watching, including myself. I feel my heart just kind of moving in all sorts of directions as you're telling the story, because you don't know what one episode of life to the next, what it's building for. I look back at my past and go, it prepared me for where I am even now. And I wonder about the now prep, where I am today. What will that lead you to? So, man, that's so inspirational.
You know, I hear my voice telling kids things, right?
Yeah.
I hear that Angela, that Mrs. Paxton, when I was a teacher and a counselor,
Sure.
right? Sitting with kids in my office or in my classroom after class, saying, what do I do about this, right? And how do I do this? This thing is hard.
That's good. Right.
This thing is mean. These people are mean, right? This, all of these things. And I would tell kids all the time, listen, I know it is hard, but you are not alone. The Lord is with you. Your parents know the truth.
Yeah.
Your friends, your real friends, you're going to learn who your real friends are. This is a blessing, right? But I used to tell them all the time, this thing that you're going through, it matters. And it matters right now in your life, but I promise you, mark my words, it matters for your future. God is using this to grow you and to shape you and to prepare you.
That's good.
For the thing He made you to do.
That's so good. That's so good, Senator. Couple things as we wrap up. First of all, did we mean to wear the same color here?
Holy Spirit moment. Holy Spirit wardrobing, right?
We showed up and we both had the same color.
We got the same color?
And pearls. We both. That was not even on purpose. At least not on our, by our will.
No. But I told you, I've been waiting for my next chance to wear this jacket because I do love this.
There you go. You look very lovely. Okay.
You look lovely.
Thank you. So, one last question. What is something that you would like to be remembered for?
Wow. That I love the Lord and I have lived with abandon toward Him.
That's good. Yeah. That's good.
It's interesting. I turned 60 this year. And I was listening to, podcast or maybe it was in a sermon. I don't remember exactly where it was. But there was mention of, the average lifespan is kind of 80-ish years, right? Maybe a little more, maybe a little less, depending on your health or your genetics or whatever. If you're female, maybe a little longer, right? If you're male, maybe a little less or whatever. Of course, we can go out and get in our car, and today might be anyone's last day, right?
Yes.
But I remember just hearing that and going, 80, I am 60. I'm 3/4, I was a math person, right? Mm-hmm. I'm 3/4 of the way through. what do I want these last 20 years
That's right.
to be about, right?
That's good.
Because you do look back and you realize, I mean, I don't know, maybe there are some people that don't feel this way. I know that I have spent so much of my life distracted by different things.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Whether it's like just, remember when my son was born and I was so tired, right, when he was an infant, and I wonder, like, I don't even remember those days, right?
Yeah, you forget.
My mom and dad were foster parents. I don't think I mentioned that to you, but they kept, I think, somewhat like 20
Wow.
foster babies,
Goodness.
infants in succession.
Wow.
About the time they'd start sleeping
Yeah.
through the night, they'd be placed for adoption, right? And I remember calling my mom, like, how did you do that? That's like brutal. And of course, my mother of two little adopted, well, I wasn't little at the time, but adopted children, right? My mom said, you know what, the brutal part actually wasn't the sleepless nights. It was when I had to place them. It was almost like kind of going through a death, right? But she said, but it was worth it, Angela, because I know what it's like to get a baby.
Aww.
So these are the parents that God gave me, right? But I think back on my life and I think about, were hard things, hard times that I was going through, and I have been at times so easily distracted or just felt overwhelmed and only thinking about how am I going to get through this, that sort of thing. And I was reading something just recently from an author that I love, Dallas Willard. He said, don't ever forget that when you think about God's will for your life, that God's will is not ultimately about, who are you supposed to marry, where are you supposed to go to college, what job should you take, what house should you pick. The ultimate will of God for you is to be formed in the character of Christ.
Yeah.
And so I think that is where I am trying to be more mindfully and more purposefully on a daily basis. So I try to start my day. I told you I try to sit by, now that I'm home for a little while, I can sit out in the morning, I have coffee, I don't have to usually be somewhere at 8 o'clock. I can spend time with the Lord. With Emmanuel.
Amen.
And I think that's what I want to be known for, and encouraging and bringing people with me to Jesus.
Amen. Well, I think you're doing a good job, Senator, because when I met you, that was one of the things that really pulled me to you. You were, honestly, I was a little taken aback because I thought, this woman, there's a transparency about her, and a strong leader, but yet gentle, and you were not afraid to talk about your faith. And so it just pulled on me. And so I thank you for your influence. I thank you for being an influence to women as well. I know that we're in the land of equality and what have you, but women have had to work hard. I can only imagine some of the challenges that you've gone through as a woman. But thank you for being an inspiration to women like myself and other women, and men too. It's not just as a woman, but for me personally, it's as a woman. And I thank you for that. Thank you for what you're doing.
Well, I remember from teaching how important it is for kids to have role models.
Yeah.
And little girls need to see women doing things.
Yes.
They don't implicitly get that they could do that,
That's
right? And I think it's easier for boys. I have a son. I didn't worry about that so much for him.
Right.
He could kind of see himself anywhere.
Right.
But I always wanted to make sure that my girls had strong, godly women in their lives. Because, I always had moms that would say, oh, my kid tells me everything. And I'm like, oh, no, they don't.
Absolutely not.
Even a close relationship, they're not going to. And so I just knew that, and I always wanted to make sure I had strong role models for my daughters in their lives that they could go talk to someone who's going to give them godly advice, right?
Absolutely.
But I'll tell you what, that has so come full circle for me.
Awesome.
My daughters are such a strong godly influence
That's
in my life. And on the day I was sworn in for the very first time, all of my family was there, of course, but I have a special relationship with my girls. And I pulled them over to the side and I said, let me tell you what your job is. as I go into this, it is your job to make sure I am one person. I am not Angela Paxton and Senator Paxton and Mrs. Ken Paxton or whatever. I want to be one person, and I've watched that happen with good Christian people.
Yeah.
And they become
Right.
different faces, right, in different places. And I just want to be God's daughter, Angela.
Amen. Well, thank you for being that woman. And Senator, it's been such a great honor. You have no idea. This has been such an honor for me. I love you from the moment that I met you.
Likewise.
And my friends, there you have Senator Angela Paxton. You heard her testimony. She has so many ways in which she can inspire you, from her testimony of adoption to being called as a senator into the Senate. I mean, that was just amazing, to being a mom, and so much more. That's right. But that's
most
first.
of all a Baba.
I'm sorry. That's first. That's first. Senator, God bless you. I can't wait to just keep seeing what the Lord's going to do in your life.
Well, Teresa, thank you so much. Thanks for just talking with me. I love the stories of what God has done in my life, and I love getting to share them, and I love getting to get to know you a little bit better this morning. I was drawn to you that night, and that's the beginning of a beautiful friendship, and I'm just so thankful for it. And thank you for what you are doing to inspire women and men, but to inspire people to not be afraid,
Amen.
to live a life that is built on love and not fear, because God is with us. Who can be against us?
Amen. That's so beautiful. Thank you. There you have it, my friends. You just joined us with the Teresa Lusk Show and Senator Angela Paxton. May God richly bless you.